The phone buzzed at 12:07 a.m., slicing through the silence of our bedroom like a knife through fabric. My husband, David, stirred beside me. He reached for the phone on the nightstand. I heard the soft click of his thumb unlocking the screen. Then, nothing. No breath, no sound, only a stillness so unnatural it made my skin prickle. "Who is it?" I whispered. David didn't answer. The blue glow of the screen lit his face, drained of all color. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then the phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the oak nightstand. A mug of cold coffee, left from earlier, toppled with it. Dark liquid spread across the wood, dripping onto the floor, carrying with it a sharp, bitter smell that filled the room. I leaned forward, heart hammering. The message was still on the screen. 4 lines. 4 lines that tore through the quiet life we had built. "I'm in Lisbon now. Don't wait for me. The money is mine. Margaret." I froze. Lisbon, Portugal. Thousands of miles away. And the money? Her retirement savings. Every dollar we had counted on for our family's future. My throat closed, my chest tightened as though the air itself had turned heavy. My mother-in-law, the woman who had eaten at our table every night for the past 3 years, the woman who swore she wanted nothing more than family around her in her golden years, had vanished, taking everything with her. The image of her chair at the dining table flashed in my mind. Just last night, she sat there with her knitted cardigan buttoned all the way up, sipping tea, nodding silently while I cleared plates. That chair was still tucked neatly under the table downstairs. And now, she was gone. "David," my voice cracked, fragile as glass. "Your mother, she really left?" He pressed both hands against his face, driving his fingers down slowly. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were empty pools. "Not just left," he whispered. His voice was lower than I had ever heard it, like it was being pulled from the bottom of his lungs. "She took everything. She took our future." The words landed like stones. Our future. Not just her money. Our security, our plans, the safety net for our daughter's college, the mortgage cushion, the promise that we wouldn't drown in debt if one of us got sick. Gone. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out the tick of the old wall clock in the hallway. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, my palms slick with sweat. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. I grabbed the phone, staring at the words again and again, as if rereading them might change them. But they didn't change. The letters glared back at me in green and white. Cold. Final. The silence between David and me stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, I pushed out the words, each syllable trembling. She betrayed us." David's hand curled into a fist on the sheet. He closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. "No," he murmured. "Betrayal is too soft a word." I looked at him, confused. But before I could ask, he opened his eyes again. They were rimmed red, wet with something I hadn't seen in years. "She didn't just leave," he said, voice breaking. "She ripped the ground out from under us." I turned away, unable to meet his eyes, because if I did, the dam inside me would burst. Instead, I fixed my gaze on the spreading coffee stain across the nightstand. The dark pool glistened under the glow of the lamp, creeping closer to the edge, dripping one slow bead after another onto the carpet. Each drop felt like a countdown, ticking away the life we thought we had. The weight of it pressed on me. The woman we let into our home, the trust we handed her, the countless nights I stayed up balancing bills while she sipped tea in silence. And now she had vanished into the European night with a cruel 4-line farewell. And in that moment, staring at the mess on the table and the emptiness in my husband's eyes, one thought anchored itself in me. The woman who once sat across from us at dinner had disappeared, not just into another country, but with every ounce of security we had trusted her with. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 42 years old, And tonight, my world cracked open with a single message. The yellow envelope still sits in the kitchen drawer. Every time I open it, a shiver runs down my spine. Its edges are soft from being handled too many times, the paper slightly torn at the corner. To anyone else, it's just stationery. To me, it's a relic of the life I lived before Margaret vanished to Lisbon. That envelope is where it all began. 3 years ago, when Margaret moved into our home at the age of 68, we thought it was temporary, just until she felt steady after retirement. Family should stick together, she had said, standing in our doorway with 2 suitcases and a faint smile. David embraced her immediately. I welcomed her too, because that's what a good daughter-in-law does. We set up the guest room with fresh sheets and a vase of lilies. I cooked her favorite chicken soup that first night. It felt right. It felt like the kind of thing families do. But soon, temporary, stretched into months. And months became years. Every month, like clockwork, I slid 1,200 from my paycheck into that yellow envelope. David added another 600 from his. We left it on the dining table, beside her teacup. She never reached for it. She just nodded once, briskly, and tucked it into her handbag. Not a word of thanks. Not even eye contact. The first time, I thought maybe she was shy. The second, perhaps distracted. By the 6th month, I knew better. The nod was all she was willing to give. I remember December especially. The heater broke that month, and our electricity bill spiked to $285. I stood in the freezing kitchen with gloves still on, the envelope clutched between my stiff fingers. I wanted to keep some of the money for ourselves, just this once. My breath fogged the air as I debated, but in the end, I laid the full amount on the table. Margaret walked in, cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her eyes flicked to the envelope. She gave that same nod. No warmth. No acknowledgement that we were cutting our own comfort to make sure she never went without. I told myself, this is what family means, sacrifice. But deep inside, a whisper asked, at what cost? I can still picture the tiny rituals that became the rhythm of our lives. Sunday mornings, me at the stove flipping pancakes, Margaret silent at the table scrolling through her phone. CS Tuesday evenings, David rushing home from work with a tired smile, handing me receipts, gas, groceries, pharmacy, so I could balance the budget. Thursdays, when I placed that envelope on the table and watched Margaret's thin fingers sweep it into her purse as though it were dust. The envelope became our silent contract. Week after week, month after month, it consumed the air in our house. And yet, I clung to the hope that this was worth it. That one day she'd smile, touch my hand, and say, Sarah, thank you. I couldn't have managed without you. That moment never came. Sometimes at night, lying awake, I'd whisper to David, do you think she knows how much we're giving up? He would sigh, eyes closed. She's my mother. She deserves it. And I would bite back my reply, and what about us? Don't we deserve a life too? Tuck it. I told myself I was being selfish. I told myself I could endure. But the cracks were already showing. Looking back, I realized the warnings were there, scattered like breadcrumbs. Once, I walked past the study and saw her on the phone, speaking in a hushed tone. Her back was straight, her voice firm, so different from the quiet, almost fragile act she put on at the table. Another time, she came home from the bank clutching a small blue folder. When she thought no one was looking, she opened it. Her eyes gleamed in the glow of the lamp, lips curling ever so slightly. I should have asked. I should have pressed. But I didn't. Instead, I turned away, convincing myself it was harmless. She's just checking her pension, I thought. It's none of my business. Now, after everything, I can see how foolish I was. I believed that giving more would earn me love. I believed that patience would be repaid with gratitude. I believed that family was about enduring, no matter the cost. But what I really did was chain myself with silence. I kept feeding that yellow envelope, thinking it held our family together. In truth, it was holding me down, binding me to a woman who saw me not as family, but as a resource. There are nights I still whisper to myself, I thought helping her would make us whole. But all I did was build my own cage. That envelope appears in so many of my memories. It feels alive. The crinkle of its paper, the faint smell of ink and cardboard, the way it disappeared into her handbag like a vanishing trick. At first, the envelope meant trust, then duty. Eventually, it came to mean betrayal. And now, years later, when I open the drawer and see it still there, empty, useless, it feels like a ghost. A reminder of everything I gave, and everything she took. When Margaret finally vanished to Lisbon, none of it should have surprised me. The secret phone calls, the glowing eyes over the bank folder, the cold nod whenever she took the money. Those were her rehearsals. Lisbon was just the final act. But in the moment, I refused to see. I clung to the fantasy that sacrifice would save us. And so the yellow envelope, once a symbol of hope, became the emblem of my self-deception. Looking back now, I realize the truth. I wasn't helping her. I was erasing myself. The morning after Margaret's message from Lisbon, the house felt colder than usual. Sunlight seeped weakly through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the kitchen table. The yellow envelope still sat in the drawer, but for the first time in 3 years, it was empty. I made coffee out of habit, poured it into my favorite chipped mug, and tried to sip. The bitterness scraped my throat. My hands trembled so hard that the liquid sloshed against the rim and spilled onto my wrist. The burn jolted me, but I didn't wipe it away. I just stared at the stains spreading across my skin, dark and ugly. That was the moment. That tiny, ordinary moment with scalding coffee on my wrist. Somehow, it carried the weight of everything. The lies, the silence, the money drained month after month. My mind began to race, voice after voice shouting inside my head. If I stay silent, we'll end up with nothing. If I stay silent, my daughter will grow up thinking love means being used. If I stay silent, I will lose the last scrap of my dignity. Axelin. The questions battered my chest like fists. How long will I keep paying for someone else's greed? Numbers. When will I start paying for myself? If not now, then when? 2. I pushed the mug aside and walked to the study. My laptop sat on the desk, screen black, as though it too was waiting for me to wake up. When I pressed the power button, the screen flared to life, glaring bright against the dim room. My hands hovered over the keyboard. They shook so badly, I had to clench them into fists to steady myself. My palms were damp, sweat trickled between my fingers. I opened the bank's website. The familiar login page blinked back at me. Username. Password. My throat tightened as if someone were watching over my shoulder, but I typed anyway. The keys clacked louder than usual, echoing in the silent house. Once inside, the list of accounts stared at me like rows of open doors. One by one, I clicked through. The joint savings, the checking, the card accounts. My cursor hovered over the secondary card, linked to Margaret's name. For 3 years, I had let her keep that card, telling myself it was convenient, that it made her feel independent. But really, it made me her hostage. Every transaction she made was a tug on the chain around my neck. I swallowed hard. My finger hovered over the option, cancel card. My hand trembled. The cursor shook with it. I could hear her voice in my head, sharp and dismissive. Family owes each other. Don't be dramatic. I could hear David's sighs, his quiet guilt. She's my mother, Sarah. What else can we do? But then, another voice rose up inside me, my own. And it was louder, clearer, stronger. No more. I clicked. A red warning box popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this card? This action cannot be undone. My chest heaved. My finger pressed down. Yes. The screen refreshed. The account blinked. The card was gone. Gone. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding so hard it felt like I'd run a mile. My shirt clung to my back with sweat. My hands, still trembling, wiped across my face. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I moved to the online access Margaret had been using. For years, she had the login. For years, I told myself it was harmless. I clicked through the security settings. With each step, my breathing steadied. New password. Two-factor authentication. Locked. The final confirmation message appeared. Your account has been secured. Unrecognized devices removed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The air came out shaky, but it carried something else too. Resolve. I knew what would happen if I hadn't pressed that button. We would keep sending money across oceans, into a void where gratitude never lived. We would drown in bills while she built her secret life abroad. We would lose our home, our savings, our future. And I would lose myself completely. The thought chilled me more than anything. To vanish while still breathing. To live as nothing but a silent provider. An invisible machine. No, I refused. When I stood from the chair, my knees shook, but something inside me had changed. The trembling wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline. My voice, when I whispered into the empty room, was steady. I cannot be her silent puppet any longer. The words rang louder than the keystrokes, louder than the ticking clock, louder than the fear that had smothered me for years. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to her. I was acting for myself. And in that shift from victim to decision maker, I felt something I hadn't in years: power. The house was too quiet that evening. I sat in the living room, the lamp throwing a yellow glow over the coffee table. On it lay a stack of unopened mail, the corner of a utility bill peeking out like an accusation. Beside it sat my daughter's half-finished puzzle, edges waiting for pieces that never seemed to fit. The room felt poisoned, familiar, yet suffocating. The laptop chimed. An incoming video call. Margaret's name pulsed on the screen. My breath caught. It had been weeks since the message from Lisbon. Weeks of silence. Now, her face was here again, pixelated but sharp, her lipstick crimson, her earrings glinting under some European light. "Sarah," she said, smooth as glass, "we need to talk business." Her tone wasn't maternal. It was corporate. She lifted a folder into the camera's view. Papers rustled. "This," she said, "is the authorization you'll need to sign. The house. It's still under my name. I want it sold." I felt my stomach twist. The walls of my living room leaned closer, like they wanted to crush me. I steadied my voice. "No, Margaret. This home is where my daughter sleeps. You don't get to snatch it with one signature." Her eyes narrowed, mouth curling. "Don't be melodramatic. I raised David. Fed him, clothed him. Now it's your turn to repay." Her words sliced, but I refused to flinch. "I've paid," I said, my voice flat. "Every month. Every envelope. I've paid more than you ever acknowledged." Margaret leaned closer to her camera, her breath fogging the pixels. "You think a few envelopes erase years of sacrifice? Don't flatter yourself." My hands clenched in my lap. "This isn't about erasing. It's about respect, and you've shown none." She smirked. "Respect? From a daughter-in-law? Please." The screen froze for half a second, her sneer caught in digital amber. Then it moved again, and so did she, pressing harder. "Sign the papers, Sarah. Do it now, or I'll make sure the law is on my side." Her words landed like a slap. My throat burned, but my spine straightened. "You want me to sign away the roof over my child's head?" Margaret tilted her chin, calm, almost amused. Children adjust. Houses are just walls. Money is what matters. Something inside me cracked open. Heat surged through my chest, flooding my veins. My palms sweated, but my voice turned steel. No, not this time. Her eyes flashed, sharp as knives. Careful, Sarah. I can drag you into court. You'll lose more than a house. I leaned forward, so close to the screen I could see my reflection in her pupils. My hands trembled, but my words cut clean. I am not your walking wallet. I am not your silent servant. I am the wall that stands between you and my family. And that wall will not fall. For a second, silence filled the call. Just the faint hum of my laptop, the buzz of the fridge in the kitchen. Margaret's face hardened, the charm gone, the venom bare. You'll regret this. Then she ended the call. The screen went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection, pale and sweating, but upright. The room was silent again, but not the same silence as before. My chest still heaved, my hands shook, yet there was fire under the trembling. I looked at the puzzle pieces on the table, my daughter's puzzle. They didn't fit yet, but they would. And for the first time, I believed we would too. I whispered into the emptiness, voice low but unbreakable. I am no longer the walking purse she thinks I am. I am the last wall standing for my family. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, thin, cream, official. I knew what it was before I opened it. I knew from the way the mailman wouldn't meet my eyes, from the way the paper rasped when I slid it free, from the dry taste in my mouth that said, "This is how wars begin now," on letterhead. Summons and complaint. Filed in County Court, May 14. Stamped in ink the color of old bruises. My hands trembled so badly, the page fluttered like a trapped bird. David wasn't home yet. The house hummed with the fridge, the thin whistle of wind through the kitchen window. Somewhere in our street, a leaf blower moaned. I read the first line and felt my knees weaken. Plaintiff, Margaret Wilson. Teleabundance, Sarah Miller and David Miller. Propters. Cause conversion, financial abuse of an elder. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. It would have been funny if it didn't split me open. Financial abuse. As if the yellow envelopes had been knives in her ribs instead of lifelines. I turned the page. That's when I saw it. The attached exhibit, a single photocopied form titled Consent to Sale. Across the bottom, in a strange, uncertain curve, my name sprawled. Sarah Miller. The room tilted. My signature, but not. My SS never dipped that low. My cur never curled like a fishhook. Someone had traced me from memory and missed the bones. The kettle clicked itself off. I hadn't remembered turning it on. I pressed both palms flat on the countertop and breathed until the wave passed. Then, with the summons and the forged consent spread under the light, I took out my phone and photographed everything. A soft, methodical click, click, click. Proof that I wasn't going crazy. Proof that the world could be this backwards and still hold. When David came in at 6:32, he found me sitting at the table with the papers in a tidy fan, my face perfectly dry and perfectly numb, the way a lake looks right before it cracks. "What is it?" he asked, already afraid. I nudged the top page toward him. Watched the color drain. Watched his mouth form no before his voice did. "She filed?" he whispered. "Against us?" "Against us." He reached the consent form last. His hands tightened until the paper wrinkled. "That's not your signature." He didn't look at me when he said it. He stared at the page like it would confess. "No," I said, "but she's betting a judge will think it is." We didn't sleep much that night. We lay there in parallel, staring at the ceiling, as if it held answers. At 3:11 a.m., I whispered into the dark, "We need a lawyer." By 3:01, David whispered back, "Michael Carter. Linda's nephew. Top of his class, she says." We clung to the thought like a rope. Michael's office smelled faintly of lemon and paper, a clean smell that made me want to cry for reasons I couldn't name. He was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, neatly trimmed beard, navy suit. His eyes were steady. I admired that steadiness, the way a swimmer admires a pier in a storm. He didn't smile much. He read. He asked short questions. When did she move in? Eco 2. Who paid what? Eco TE. Any texts about the arrangement? CSS. Allo, any bank access. I answered. David answered. I slid a folder across the table. My small, stubborn archive. Bank statements with highlighted lines. Photos of the envelope on the table with dates scribbled on sticky notes. Jan 7/1/1800 total. Feb 5/1/1800. Mar 10/1/1800. A spreadsheet of household utilities. I had never been prouder of my boring paperwork. When Michael got to the forged consent, he paused. Will you sign like this? He asked. No, I said, and demonstrated on a legal pad. Tight strokes. Hard stop at the HHHHH, a habit from childhood teachers who hated flourish. He compared them, side by side. Good, he said softly. I mean, it's not good that she tried. It's good that she tried this badly. A laugh bubbled up and broke inside me. It wasn't pretty. Michael waited for it to pass. He tapped the complaint. Here's what they're doing, he said. They're framing the monthly support as coercion, then saying you funneled her pension to yourselves. The consent to sell proves intent, that you plan to liquidate her home and pocket the proceeds. It's a story, on paper. I gave her money, I said, uselessly. Every month. I made soup. I washed her sweaters with lavender detergent. Michael raised a hand. And we'll show that. We won't preach it. We'll prove it. How? David asked. 3 pillars, Michael said, counting them on his fingers. 1. Handwriting analysis. 2. Timelines. Bank records, texts, witnesses. 3. Character. Yours and hers, demonstrated, not declared. And Sarah. He looked at me. You'll have to tell the truth without apologizing for it. I'm not good at that, I said. You'll get good, he answered. Fast. Word always finds a way out. By Thursday, it fluttered through the cul-de-sac like a lost receipt. At the market, 2 aisles over from the cereal, I caught whisper fragments. Elder abuse, police, Europe, that stuck to me like cobwebs. On Friday morning, Mrs. B's. Patel from 3 doors down waved from her porch with a tight smile and a smaller wave than usual. The kind that says, I don't know which side to be on yet, so I'll be on the safest one. Far away. I could feel eyes on me at the gas station, at school pickup, even on our sidewalk when I bent to pull a weed from the crack. It wasn't cruelty. It was curiosity sharpened by fear. People like stories with clean villains. They hate it when the villain looks like a grandmother with a cardigan and a rosary. That afternoon, I cried in the car, quiet, choking sobs that shook all the way to my fingertips, the kind that leave you empty but heavy. I held the steering wheel like it was a railing on a ship. After a minute, the passenger door opened. My daughter slipped in, small and sure, a warm planet entering orbit. She didn't say anything at first. She just pressed her cheek to my shoulder and breathed with me until my breaths shrank from storms to waves. When she finally spoke, it was into my sleeve. Mom, she said, you're stronger than her. I don't know how children know things like that. Maybe they read the world by gravity, not by words. I kissed her hair and tasted salt. A week later, May 21st, 10:14 a.m. Michael forwarded an email from opposing counsel, Brennan and Shaw, LLP. Attached were 3 sworn statements. 1. A pharmacy tech who claimed Margaret paid for all our prescriptions for years, shaking her head at Sarah's stinginess. 2. A neighbor who swore he'd seen me yelling in the driveway and withholding Margaret's mail. 3. A church acquaintance who called me controlling and cold. I read each line with the blank calm of someone listening to their own eulogy in the wrong language. Then I put my head down on the table and laughed. Short, barking laughs that felt nothing like humor. David bristled. "This is garbage." "It's a frame," Michael said. He already had a pen in his hand, underlining, circling. "We don't argue with the frame. We replace it." "How?" I asked again, exhausted. "We bring receipts." Literally. He pointed to the pharmacy statement. "Itemized invoice shows your card on file for routine meds." "We subpoena." "The neighbor? He moved here last September. You've lived here 8 years." His years shrink to 10 months on paper. "The church acquaintance?" Michael glanced at the name. "Does she know the pastor's wife is Linda's sister?" I blinked. "No." "Then she's going to have a rough afternoon," he said dryly. For the first time, a small, guilty warmth. "We are not alone in this." Each day, Linda came with a battered accordion folder tied with string. "I'm old-fashioned," she said, setting it on our table like a cake. Inside, handwritten notes from Tuesday dinners, photos from block parties where Margaret sat, stone-faced, while other women laughed, and a stray receipt from March 12 when Linda had paid for Margaret's manicure because Margaret forgot her wallet. Linda had written on the receipt in careful blue cursive, "Reimbursed?" "No. Use it if you must," she murmured. Her eyes were bright with indignation. "Let them say, elder abuse, to my face." George showed up the next day with 2 USB sticks and a folded paper from his doorbell camera manual. "Caught her on my porch a few times," he said, scratching his jaw. Feb 20, she asked me how to turn off those digital locks. March 5. She said she might take back what's mine before they notice. Thought it was talk. Guess it wasn't. He was embarrassed to have waited. I wasn't angry. I was grateful for anything solid in a flood. Michael, when I forwarded the files, wrote back one word. "Excellent. We met again." June 2, 9:00 a.m. in Michael's lemon and paper office. He had made a map on the whiteboard. Dates, arrows, copies of statements tacked in neat rows. It looked like a crime show, except quieter, kinder. "Opposing counsel is trying to widen the narrative," he said. "We narrow it. We keep coming back to 3 questions for the court. 1. Did Sarah sign a consent to sell? 2. Who paid for what and when? 3. Does the plaintiff's behavior align with being exploited or with orchestrating a cash grab?" He underlined each with a squeak of marker. "We don't speculate. We demonstrate." "What about the neighborhood whispers?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "They don't matter in there," he said, meaning the courtroom. "They matter to you. Which is why we're going to build your courage muscle. Sarah, I need you to practice answering without apologizing. Facts, not feelings, but from your mouth, not mine." He slid a list across the table. 10 questions. "Tonight. In the mirror." I took the paper. My name at the top looked braver than I felt. The next 2 weeks were an accordion of dread and relief. One day, Brennan and Shaw filed a motion dripping with insinuation. The next, we found a receipt that punctured it. I started keeping a small notebook in my pocket. The same kind chefs tuck behind aprons times, names, little hard pebbles of reality to grip when the ground went soft. CARDCANCELEDC, date A time. MARGARETBANKFEB182. 13 p.m. Linda saw her. ENVELOP, EAPRIL7, photo on my phone, timestamp 19:04. At night, when I practiced with the mirror, I watched my face learn a new language. The first time I answered, my mouth twisted around disclaimers. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." Michael's voice in my head cut in. "Facts. Sarah." The second time, the words came cleaner. The third, I met my own eyes and didn't look away. On a humid Wednesday, the air like wet cloth, The four of us, me, David, Linda, and George, sat at our dining table and ate takeout Thai from paper cartons. No strategies. Just food. The smell of basil and chili chased some stale odor of fear from the corners. George told a story about his dog's obsession with the mail carrier. Linda laughed so hard she had to dab her eyes. For 10 minutes, we were simply us SSS. The relief of it made my ribs loosen. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath. After they left, I stood at the sink with my hands in warm, soapy water, listening to the small clink of chopsticks against plates. The ordinary sounds were a lullaby I had missed. I whispered to the empty room, "We'll get through this." The room, gentle for once, didn't argue, but fear is patient. It waits under the bed like a tidy pair of shoes. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the microwave door, eyes rimmed red, mouth a hard line, and I thought, what if she wins? Not legally, though, that too, but socially. What if she convinced the town I was a monster? What if my daughter carried that shadow into adulthood? What if, years from now, when someone asked about her childhood, she said, "It was the time when everyone thought my mother hurt my grandmother." I pressed my hands to the counter until the edges bit my palms. The old, reflexive apologies rose in my throat. I swallowed them like bitter pills. In the driveway, a car slowed, then crept forward again. I recognized the face. Mrs. Patel, and raised a hand, tentative. She hesitated, then rolled down her window. "I heard," she said awkwardly, "that you're dealing with something." The euphemism hung between us like wet laundry. "We are," I said. She nodded, eyes softening. "If you need me to drive your daughter next week, I can." A small offer. A decent one. Not a banner, not a speech. It steadied me more than any defense could have. "Thank you," I said. 2 words that tasted like water. On June 18, a letter from Brennan and Shaw landed with another sick thump. They were adding a witness, a financial advisor, who had counseled Margaret regarding the risk Sarah posed. Michael called within minutes. "Preemptive smear," he said. "I'll depose him. Half these guys sell annuities by scaring old people about their families. What if he sounds convincing?" I asked. "He will," Michael said. "That's their point. Ours will be numbers. They don't look like much until the judge realizes they all balance." I pictured a scale. One side heavy with polished words, the other with small coins of truth. I prayed mine would clink louder. That night, storm clouds stacked over our neighborhood like books. I sat in the car in the driveway and let the rain drum the roof until the white noise washed my thoughts clean. Then I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet after hush, the kind that makes your own breathing sound like something you might learn to love again. David knocked on the window and slid into the passenger seat. We didn't talk. We held hands. Lightning flickered, a nervous system across the sky. After a while, I said, "Do you believe me?" He squeezed once, hard. "I failed to believe in you soon enough," he said. "I'm not making that mistake again." The honesty of it hurt. It healed, too. The following morning, June 19, 8:06 a.m. My phone lit up with a video call request from an unknown Lisbon number. I didn't answer. I watched it ring itself out, watched the small icon fade. My pulse tripped and stuttered, but my hand didn't reach for the green button. Progress can look like inaction. I brewed coffee. I didn't spill it. I sipped slowly, and it didn't scrape. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see the living room. Same yellow lamp, same puzzle with edges still waiting. I realized not everything broken needed to be replaced. Some things could be finished. The summons sat on the counter where I had left it, neat now, clipped to our responses, our evidence, our steadiness. There will be a courtroom. There will be testimony. There will be Margaret with her polished venom, and there will be me with my plain truth. Somewhere between those, a gavel will fall. I rinsed my cup and set it upside down on the drying rack. The morning light touched its rim and made a thin halo. And then the question that had been pacing inside me for weeks stood still at last and faced me. When the person who taught you to doubt yourself is willing to lie under oath to erase you, how do you hold the line without losing the softness that makes you you? It was close to midnight when I decided to tidy the study. The drawers had been a mess for weeks. Bills mixed with birthday cards, stray pens, sticky notes curling at the edges. I told myself I was just killing time, trying to keep busy while sleep refused to come. I pulled open the middle drawer of David's desk. Envelopes, receipts, an old pack of gum. My fingers sifted through until they landed on something heavier. A manila folder wedged at the back. I dragged it out, dust whispering off the edges. The clasp gave way with a reluctant snap. Inside, photocopies. Legal stationery. The first page stopped my breath. Consent to sale. At the bottom, scrawled in black ink, was my name, Sarah Miller. Except, it wasn't. The S dipped low, unnaturally. The R curled like a fishhook. The line across the HH wavered, uneven. My stomach flipped. My skin prickled cold. My hands trembled as I lifted the page closer to the lamplight. The paper was smooth, but it burned against my fingertips. I could smell faint toner, sharp and metallic, as though the lie itself had a scent. My heart pounded. My ears filled with the heavy tick of the wall clock. This isn't mine. This isn't mine. This isn't mine. The words repeated in my skull like a drumbeat. I whispered aloud, voice raw, barely air. Finally, I have her mistake. My legs felt weak. I sat hard on the edge of the chair, the paper shaking between my hands. Every nerve screamed to tear it in half, to shred it until nothing remained. But another instinct, colder, sharper, kept me still. Keep it. This is proof. The door creaked behind me. David's footsteps, soft but certain. He must have heard the drawer. Sarah? His voice was thick with sleep. I turned slowly, the copy still in my hand. My throat ached as words scraped out. David, look at this. He frowned, stepping closer. I held the page out. He bent over, eyes narrowing. The silence stretched until I couldn't bear it. My chest tightened. David, I said, my voice breaking, this is not my signature. He looked again, then back at me, as if double-checking the woman in front of him against the ink on the page. His lips parted, but no words came. He swallowed, tried again. Mom. The word trembled, fragile. Mom really did this. I couldn't bring myself to answer. My silence was answer enough. David's shoulders sagged. He pressed both hands to his face, then dragged them down slowly. His eyes glistened when they met mine. I shook my head, fury and grief tangled in my chest. She didn't just leave us, David. She forged me. She's trying to erase me. The page crinkled in my trembling grip. For a moment, I imagined the judge's bench, the gavel, the lies stacked neatly in glossy folders. I saw my daughter's face, confused, frightened, asking why Grandma wanted us gone. My pulse thundered. My hands were cold, but my voice hardened, sharp as broken glass. If I crumble now, she wins. If I stay quiet, she rewrites our story. See, if I don't fight, I lose everything. Our home, our daughter's safety, myself. I folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the folder, and pressed it flat. My breath was heavy, but steady. I looked at David, who still stood frozen, disbelief shadowing his face. Listen to me, I said. This is the crack in her armor. We use this. We don't run from it. He nodded slowly, as if waking from a long sleep. You're right. His voice was hoarse. God, Sarah, you're right. I set the folder on the desk, palms flat on it, grounding myself. And in that moment, clarity pierced through the haze. I realized, sometimes the traitor isn't outside on the street. It's right inside your home. Michael Carter's office became my war room. The smell of lemon cleaner and paper no longer just comforted me. It sharpened me. Every folder, every clipped receipt, every time-stamped photo sat in neat stacks across his desk like weapons laid out before battle. Michael was precise. We lead with the bank statements. We follow with handwriting analysis. We close with testimony. His voice was calm, but his eyes flicked to mine as if measuring my steel. Sarah, you'll have to stand under oath and let them try to shake you. And you'll have to hold. I nodded, though my stomach churned. The thought of Margaret's lawyer firing questions at me, of strangers judging my every word, made my skin crawl. Still, I nodded again, firmer this time. I'll hold. The days that followed were filled with paper. I spread bank statements across our dining table, highlighter in hand. Each yellow streak felt like a blade carving truth into the record. March 12, 1,800 withdrawn. April 7th, 1,800. May 5, 1,800. Beside them lay my notebook of household expenses, electric bills, gas receipts, grocery lists. The handwriting was mime, messy at the edges, but consistent. Real. Lived. David installed copies of George's doorbell camera videos on a USB stick. Linda brought over her accordion folder again, this time with cookies tucked inside. Sugar helps, she said, pressing the tin into my hands. I laughed, shaky but grateful. One night, sitting cross-legged on the floor, I wrote out a timeline on butcher paper. Arrows, dates, notes. My daughter leaned against me, tracing the lines with her finger like it was a puzzle. It looks like a story, she whispered. It is, I said softly. It's our story, and we have to tell it right. Michael insisted on practice. At first, I hated it. He asked me to sit in the chair across from him while he fired mock questions. Did you sign this consent to sell, Mrs. Miller? My mouth went dry. No, My voice cracked. Michael leaned forward. Again. Did you exploit your mother-in-law financially? The words knifed through me. My throat closed. I stammered. No, I gave. Again, he pressed. I left that day feeling gutted. But I tried again that night, in the privacy of my bathroom mirror. The first attempt, my reflection looked back at me with wide, fearful eyes. My voice trembled. I sound guilty, I thought. The second attempt, I swallowed hard, forced the words out stronger, but they caught in my chest. My shoulders slumped. The third attempt, I straightened my back, met my own gaze, and said it clear. No, I did not exploit her. I gave. I endured. I stood. For the first time, my reflection didn't flinch. My chest expanded with breath instead of fear. I whispered into the mirror. I am not afraid anymore. In the middle of the chaos, friends showed up. Linda with coffee and her folder. George with printouts and a stubborn grin. Even Mrs. Patel from down the street stopped by one evening, carrying a homemade pie. I thought you might need something sweet, she said awkwardly. I set the pie on the counter and blinked back tears. Thank you, I whispered. It wasn't just about food or paperwork. It was about not being alone. Still, fear clawed at me in quiet moments. Folding laundry, I remembered the nights when I swallowed my protests, told myself, this is family, this is duty. I saw myself setting down yellow envelopes month after month, silent, compliant. Never again. This time, I would speak. This time, I would not bow my head. By the final week before the hearing, my dining table looked like an armory. Stacks of receipts like shields, USB drives like arrows, bank statements like polished steel. I touched each one, steadying my breath. This isn't paper, I told myself. This is my proof. This is my weapon. This is my voice. Michael came by to review it all. He scanned the table, nodded once, then looked at me. You're ready, he said. I believed him. On the eve of the hearing, I stood again before my mirror. My hands no longer trembled. My voice no longer cracked. I will not be silenced, I told my reflection. I will not be erased. I will not let her rewrite my life. And then, softly but firmly, I am not afraid anymore. My chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the words. I turned off the light, leaving the mirror dark, but the strength in my bones stayed lit. When I lay down that night, sleep finally came, not as escape, but as rest. Tomorrow would be battle. But for the first time, I felt armed. Because I knew I wasn't just preparing for a courtroom, I was preparing to take myself back. The courtroom is colder than it looks. High ceiling. Fluorescent lights the color of winter. Polished wood that reflects faces back at themselves, a mirror you can't escape. Every sound is magnified. Heels ticking across marble, a cough stifled into a sleeve. The low murmur of people who came to watch a family's bones be counted. I sit at counsel table beside Michael Carter. The legal pads are lined up like floorboards, the USB drives in a neat little row. Across the aisle, Margaret sits very straight, lipstick, a hard red, earrings like small coins. She keeps her eyes on the judge's bench, as if she already knows the verdict, and it favors her. When her gaze does flicker toward me, it is quick and dry as a match. The bailiff calls the court to order. We all rise. The judge enters, black robe swallowing the light. He nods. We sit, and the air changes denser, as if the room has been sealed. On the record. Case number read. Names spoken aloud. Plaintiff: Margaret Wilson. Defendants: Sarah Miller and David Miller. It sounds absurd and perfect at once, like a terrible song with a chorus you can't stop hearing. The prosecutor's voice. Margaret's hired attorney from Brennan and Shaw is smooth, parish priest smooth. He stands with both hands on the lectern and tells the room a story. A vulnerable elder, an ungrateful daughter-in-law, a son torn and controlled. He talks about patterns of economic coercion. He nods toward an exhibit binder as if it were scripture. People shift in their seats. I hear someone behind me whisper, "Elder abuse," and feel my spine go ice. Michael leans close, his breath lemon clean. "Remember," he murmurs, "it's just a frame. We'll replace it." I pinch the edge of my seat and nod. They start with documents. The summons and complaint we received at home. Photocopies of credit card statements, they say, suggest suspicious consolidation. And then the star, a sheet titled "Consent to Sale," presented in a plastic sleeve, as if protecting its lie from oxygen. Opposing counsel lifts it, lets the light catch the signature. Sarah Miller, in fishhook curves. "This," he says, voice resonant, "is the defendant's authorization. Her clear intent to liquidate the property in question, property still under Mrs. Mender. Wilson's legal title." He looks at me when he says, "clear intents." His smile is almost kind, like a man offering communion. "Mark it as Plaintiff's Exhibit 7, the clerk says. The attorney turns to the jury box that isn't there. This is a bench trial, just the judge, and performs anyway. "Your Honor, Ms. Wilson will testify to a history of intimidation. She will testify that Mrs. Miller controlled access to funds, isolated her socially, and," he lets it hang, "a fog of insinuation." "Call your first witness," the judge says, voice flat as a plank. Margaret takes the stand. She moves like the queen of a smaller country, right hand raised. Sworn in. She sits and folds her fingers as carefully as arranging silverware. "Ms. Wilson," her attorney prompts, "tell the court what happened when you moved in with the defendants." She does. Her voice is soft sugar. She flips the story like a cushion. "All the lumps are ours." She says, "We insisted." She contribute her retirement into a central fund for convenience. She says, "I discouraged her from going to church because neighbors ask questions." She says she had to keep a secret stash for her safety, just in case. When she gets to Lisbon, she lifts her chin. I had to protect what remained of my independence. I was afraid. Afraid. The word trembles like a hymn. Michael scribbles something. I stare at Margaret's hands and think of years of yellow envelopes disappearing inside that same handbag. Not trembling then. Opposing counsel presents Exhibit 7. Do you recognize this consent, Ms. Wilson? She nods, tender as if remembering an old recipe. Sarah signed it. She said we should sell before the market worsened. I thought she would keep the proceeds. Thank you, the attorney says. The lie lands gently. That's how the worst ones always land. Cross-examination. Michael is all quiet knives. Ms. Wilson, when did you move into the defendant's home? 3 years ago. And you received monthly support from them? Her mouth thins. We shared expenses. How much did they provide, specifically? I don't recall. Michael slides a sheet onto the rail. Defendant's Exhibit A. Bank withdrawals in the amounts of $1,800 on the 7th day of each month for the past 30 months. Your Honor, we'll show additional corroboration from third parties. He turns, still mild. Ms. Wilson, you never contributed money to the household? I made purchases. Groceries. Prescriptions. We'll check that, he says, pleasant as tea. One more question. When you say Sarah signed the consent, did you watch her sign it? Margaret hesitates, the smallest hitch. She brought it to me after. I trusted her. Of course, Michael says. No further questions at this time. I want to breathe. I don't. The advisor. They parade a financial advisor. A man who says he warned Margaret about undue influence. Beneath Michael's cross, his credentials wilt. He sells annuities. He met Margaret once for 40 minutes and wrote a risk memo that reads like a template with her name pasted in. His smile collapses by degrees as the judge raises an eyebrow. The neighbor. A neighbor testifies he saw me yelling in our driveway for years. Michael asks how long the neighbor has lived on our street. Since last September. Years, Michael repeats, same pleasant voice. The judge looks down, writes something. Opposing counsel sits, jaw tight. By the time Michael calls Linda, the fluorescent lights feel warmer. She walks like she belongs, because she does. This is her town as much as ours. Mrs. Vargas, Michael says. How long have you known the defendants? 8 years, she says. We share Tuesday dinners. Or we used to. Did you ever witness the defendants provide cash support to the plaintiff? Linda nods. Every month. The yellow envelope. Sarah left it on the table. I teased her once for being old-fashioned. She glances at me and smiles like I'm still her neighbor and not a defendant. She said tradition helps her keep track. Did the plaintiff ever express gratitude? Linda's mouth tightens. Not in front of me. She pauses. Once, March 12, I paid for Margaret's manicure because she forgot her wallet. She never reimbursed me. She lifts a receipt. The blue cursive glints. Reimbursed? No. Move to admit Defendant's Exhibit D, Michael says. Admitted. Then George, plain, steady voice. The weight of a man with nothing to prove. Mr. Clay, Michael says. Do you own a doorbell camera? I do. Did it capture any interactions with the plaintiff? George clears his throat. February 20. She asked how to turn off those digital locks. March 5. She said she might take back what's mine before they notice. I thought she was venting. Turns out she meant it. We watch a 15-second clip. The sound is tinny, but the words are unmistakable. In the gallery, someone exhales sharply. The judge writes again. Opposing counsel objects to relevance. Overruled. The pharmacist Michael calls a pharmacist from our local store to rebut the "she paid our prescriptions" tale. He brings itemized invoices, my card on file, my signature, dates, mundane proof that shines brighter than rhetoric. Who paid for the plaintiff's prescriptions on April 9? Mrs. Miller, he says, glancing at me. Credit ending 943. And on May 14? Also, Mrs. Miller, same card. The air shifts a notch. Numbers do what accusations couldn't. They rearrange the room's gravity. Handwriting analyst next. White hair, careful eyes. He explains loops and pressure, baselines and speed. He shows the court how my authentic signature tight strokes, hard stop at the chi, differs from the looping imitation on the consent form. In my professional opinion, he says, pointer tapping the screen. Exhibit 7 is not written by Mrs. Desters. Miller. It is a simulation. He lifts his chin toward the bench. A poor one. Opposing counsel tries to nick him on methodology. He declines to bleed. Michael calls David. My husband walks to the stand in a suit that still looks like a borrowed language. He raises his hand, swears in, sits. Opposing counsel tries to carve him from me. Mr. Miller, the attorney says, do you love your mother? Yes, David says, voice small. Did you grow up believing children should support their parents? Yes. And did your wife encourage distance between you and your mother? David looks at me. The ache in his face is a C. No, he says. My wife made room for my mother, at our table. In our budget, in our lives. Yet your mother fled the country, the attorney purrs. Curious, isn't it? David's jaw flexes. What's curious, he says, soft but cutting, is how much she took while we were looking the other way. Opposing counsel pivots. Did you ever see your wife sign the consent to sell? No. Could she have? David's hands grip the sides of the witness chair. She did not. His voice steadies, then strengthens. She would not. The attorney tries again. The judge glances at the clock, then says, Counsel, move on. The gavel is still for now, but the command has the weight of wood. Michael calls me. My legs feel like borrowed scaffolding when I stand. I raise my hand. Swear. Sit. The chair is too hard. The mic is too close. I can hear my breath. Mrs. Miller, Michael says, gentle. Did you sign Exhibit 7? No, I say. My voice doesn't shake. I did not. Who paid the plaintiff's routine expenses? I did, I say. We did. My husband and I. Every month. We placed cash in an envelope on our table and watched it disappear. He nods, slow, anchoring me. Why didn't you object? Why didn't you stop? The question hits like a bruise I've been protecting. But we rehearsed honesty without apology. Because I thought sacrifice would keep us whole, I say. Because I thought love meant enduring. Because I was wrong. He lets the words sit, unadorned. Then he says, tell the court what changed. Lisbon, I say. The room flickers with the memory of that midnight message, and then I found the copy of the forged consent. I realized I wasn't just being used. I was being erased. Opposing counsel approaches like a shark that learned to smile. Mrs. Miller, he says, breath sweet with something chemical. Isn't it true you wanted the house sold? No. Isn't it true you controlled Ms. Sage Wilson's access to her money? No, I say again, quiet as a stone. He tries to needle calls me controlling, suggests I kept Margaret from church. Michael objects. Sustained. The attorney rephrases, but the point is dull now. Numbers have made his blade heavy. He raises Exhibit 7 for a flourish. So you deny this is your signature? I do, I say. Why should the court believe you? Because truth is cumulative, I think. Because lies grate. Because handwriting bears the weight of its owner. Because it isn't mine, I say simply. And because you've heard why. My hands are steady on the rail. My heart is not a drum anymore, it's a bell. We break for lunch. When we reconvene, the judge says he will hear brief statements before findings. Opposing counsel goes first. He polishes the same story with different cloth. Then Michael nudges me. You can speak, he whispers. You don't have to. But you can. I stand. My knees remember to lock. I face the bench. My voice is the voice I practiced in the mirror when the house slept. Your Honor, I say. I loved her as a mother. But love cannot be twisted into a leash. I am not disposable. I am the wall that keeps my child safe. The words are simple, but they land with a weight that feels older than me. I sit. The room is very quiet. Even the lights seem to hum softer. The judge takes off his glasses, cleans them with the end of his robe, and sets them back on his nose. When he speaks, it is measured lumber solid. Careful. Ms. Wilson's complaint alleges conversion, financial abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, he says. What the evidence shows is rather different. He ticks points off with a pen. Tell a fee. First, on Exhibit 7, the alleged consent to sell. I credit the expert testimony. The signature is a simulation. It is not Mrs. Miller's. Second, on the matter of household support, contemporaneous records and third-party testimony establish that the defendants provided regular cash assistance and paid routine expenses. TSE. Third, several plaintiff witnesses were either unreliable or mistaken as to dates and durations. The doorbell footage bears significant weight. Opposing counsel's jaw clamps. Margaret stares at a spot on the judge's bench, as if willing it to crack. The judge's voice deepens. The court therefore dismisses the claims with prejudice. Further, the court recognizes the defendant's equitable interests and confirms title in the residence as belonging to Sarah and David Miller. Any encumbrances predicated on Exhibit 7 are void. The words pile like stones in a wall. Each one slots into place and holds. He lifts the gavel. It falls. Crack. Sound shivers through wood, into bone. In the second after, the whole room exhales. A chair creaks. Someone whispers, "Thank God." David grips my hand so hard it hurts, and I am grateful for pain that proves I am here. Michael squeezes my shoulder. One swift press. Unsentimental, perfect. Across the aisle, Margaret doesn't move. Her lipstick looks too bright under the fluorescence. For a heartbeat, I want her to look at me, to see me not as a wallet or a wall, but as a person who tried. She doesn't. She stares at the bench, and the red of her mouth is a flag in a country I no longer live in. We stand. The bailiff calls, "All rise," again. The judge leaves. People begin to collect their coats, their programs, their opinions. Linda appears like sunlight in a doorway, arms already reaching. She smells like coffee and hand lotion. "You did it," she murmurs into my hair. George nods once. A carpenter admiring a beam that holds. Outside, the corridor is warm and echoing. A window at the end pours in late afternoon light, the kind that turns dust to gold. We walk toward it as if toward water. I don't cry. Or maybe I do, but the tears don't sting. They taste like salt and air. David stops me under the window and presses his forehead to mine. "We keep the house," he says, and the boy in him breaks and heals at the same time. "We keep us," I answer. We step out onto the courthouse steps. The city sounds normal again. Buses sighing, a dog barking somewhere, a bicycle bell. A breeze lifts the edge of my jacket. For the first time in months, I inhale fully and nothing catches. Behind me, in that cold room, a gavel made of wood and weight found the table. In front of me, the world waits like an unwritten page. The moment the gavel fell, I heard it clearly. Freedom has a sound. The courthouse felt miles behind me, yet its weight still clung to my skin. By the time we reached home, dusk had settled like ash. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. No thunder, only the memory of thunder. I walked straight to the kitchen. The lamp over the table cast a pale golden circle across the wood. And there it was, the empty chair. Margaret's chair. For 3 years, it had been occupied every evening, her cardigan draped neatly over the back, her tea cooling half forgotten by her side. Now, it was only wood and silence. I sat down across from it. My hands traced the grain of the table, the grooves worn by dinners and arguments, by envelopes slid across without thanks. The chair stared back at me like a ghost. I closed my eyes. The sound of the gavel still echoed in my skull, crack, final and sharp. The judge's words, dismissed with prejudice, void, confirmed title, had been heavy, triumphant. Everyone had congratulated me. David squeezed my hand until his knuckles went white. Linda kissed my cheek. George clapped my shoulder. But here, in this kitchen, the victory felt thinner. I should have been jubilant. I should have been laughing. Instead, a strange hollowness stretched inside me. I had won. And yet, I won. But I lost a mother-in-law forever. CHEI. Won. But I watched my husband sit on the opposite side of truth for too long before he came back. BSHI. I won, but my daughter lost her grandmother, in every sense of the word. I whispered to the empty chair. We survived you. But at what cost? The words floated into the kitchen air, fragile as dust motes. My body still carried the adrenaline of the courtroom. Every muscle expected another question, another accusation. My chest tightened as though Margaret's lipstick red smile might reappear in the doorway and declare, appeal. I rubbed my arms, trying to quiet the tremor. Did I really win? I wondered. Or did I just stop losing? The thought scared me more than the trial. I stood and filled the kettle. The water hissed and roared, then quieted into a simmer. I dropped a tea bag into my chipped mug, watched the brown spiral bloom. I carried it to the table, sat again, and wrapped both hands around the warmth. The kitchen window was open a crack, and the night air slipped in, cool, carrying the scent of grass still wet from morning rain. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then silence again. I lifted the mug. The tea tasted bitter at first, then mellow. I breathed it in like medicine. In the steam, I saw old images, Margaret lowering her eyes as I slid the yellow envelope across the table. David, avoiding my gaze when I wanted to protest. My daughter whispering, Mom, you're stronger than her. As each memory carried both weight and release. I had carried them like stones in my pockets. Tonight, one by one, I felt them loosen. But even as they slipped, the ache remained. Winning didn't erase betrayal. It didn't erase 3 years of silence, of being measured by the thickness of an envelope instead of the depth of my care. I set the mug down and spoke into the hush. I won. But am I truly free? The clock on the wall answered with its steady tick, nothing more. My heart pressed the question deeper. What does freedom mean if it still hurts to breathe in the spaces she left behind? I pushed back from the table and opened the back door. The night air brushed my face, cool and forgiving. The garden stretched quiet under moonlight. Barefoot, I stepped onto the grass. The earth was damp and soft beneath me. I tilted my head back, letting the stars blur and sharpen in the dark. For the first time since the trial, I felt something shift. Not joy, not yet, but a loosening. A possibility. I inhaled, and this time the breath came without the shadow of Margaret's voice in my ears. Only the sound of leaves rustling, alive, indifferent, free. I returned to the kitchen, leaving the door ajar. The chair was still empty, but it no longer glared. It was just furniture again. My reflection in the window looked back, tired but upright. I touched the rim of my mug, now cooling, and whispered, It begins here. Not the end of the story, the beginning of myself. And as I carried the cup to the sink, I felt something lighter, almost fragile but real, rising through my chest. The first morning in the new apartment smelled of salt and coffee. I padded barefoot across the cool wooden floor, the sea breeze slipping through the half-open balcony door. Outside, Waves folded and unfolded like a steady breath. I lifted my mug-light, fragile porcelain, instead of the chipped heaviness I once clung to, and held it against the wind. The warmth in my hands matched the sun that had just broken the horizon. It was simple, ordinary, but it was also everything. Selling the old house had been harder than the trial itself. Every corner of it carried echoes. Margaret's cardigan over the chair, the yellow envelopes, the silence that weighed more than words. Signing the papers to let it go felt like cutting away scar tissue, sharp, necessary, irreversible. But the day we packed the last box, I didn't look back. I closed the door, locked it once, and dropped the key into the realtor's hand without ceremony. I didn't need ceremony. What I needed was a beginning. The apartment by the sea gave me that. Smaller, yes. Simpler, yes. But when I opened the windows, the rooms filled with air that didn't belong to anyone else. I thought of the night Margaret's message arrived, glowing on David's phone. I remembered the weight of it, the way the phone seemed to crush the table, the way my chest compressed until breathing hurt. That phone had felt like a stone tied to my neck. This morning, I lifted a mug of coffee that felt almost weightless. My hands no longer trembled. The comparison was so sharp, it nearly made me laugh. From a phone heavy with betrayal, to a cup light with freedom. It wasn't just coffee. It was proof. Proof that I had crossed the distance between those two moments. Life in the apartment unfolded like pages from a fresh notebook. I joined a local women's circle that met every Thursday in a cafe overlooking the water. We shared stories of husbands lost, of parents cruel, of children ungrateful. Each tale was a mirror, showing me I wasn't the only one who had carried weight disguised as love. I traveled for the first time in years, not far. Just a weekend trip to Charleston with my daughter. We wandered through cobblestone streets, ate too much ice cream, and laughed until our sides hurt. She slipped her hand into mine and said, "You're lighter now, Mom." I smiled, because she was right. I began volunteering at a local shelter, helping women sort through paperwork, teaching them how to track expenses, how to see numbers as tools instead of chains. When one of them whispered, "I thought I was alone," I squeezed her hand and said, "You're not. None of us are." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, my silence had been my prison. Now, my voice was my offering. Some things followed me, but they changed their meaning. The yellow envelope, once a symbol of endless giving, now sat pinned on my bulletin board. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. Never again without gratitude. Never again without boundaries. The chipped mug, the one that burned my wrist the night I reached breaking point, I kept too. I planted a small succulent inside it. Green spikes reached upward, stubborn, alive. What once held bitterness, now held growth. Even the empty chair found its echo. On the balcony, I placed a simple wooden one, angled toward the sea. When I sat in it, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I was waiting for the tide, the sunrise, the next breath. I didn't write speeches. I didn't lecture my daughter or friends. Instead, I wrote in my journal one evening, "Love is not measured by silence. Generosity is not proof of worth. And family without respect is not family at all." HDF. I left the page unfinished, the pen resting across the lines. Some truths don't need a period. They need space. When people asked how I managed to endure the lawsuit, I didn't give them strategy. I told them about the night I stood in front of my mirror, spine straight, voice steady, saying, "I am not afraid anymore." That was the beginning of everything. I never looked for news of Margaret. Whether she stayed in Lisbon or drifted somewhere else, I let her absence be its own verdict. I didn't need to know if she struggled or thrived. The story of her punishment, if there was one, wasn't mine to write. What mattered was this: she no longer owned space in my house, my accounts, or my mind. Mornings became my favorite. I'd step onto the balcony with my mug, hair tousled by the salt wind, and watch seagulls cut across the sky. Sometimes David joined me, sometimes my daughter. Sometimes I stood alone. Each version felt complete. We rearranged our days around laughter instead of fear. Dinner wasn't a ritual of obligation anymore. It was tacos on paper plates, stories spilling over like salsa, music humming low from the radio. And when I walked into the bedroom at night, I no longer carried the invisible ledger of who owed what. I carried only myself, lighter, unbroken, whole. One morning, months after the trial, I caught my reflection in the balcony window. The woman looking back at me wasn't hunched, wasn't shadowed. She held a cup of coffee, light as air, and her shoulders were free. I whispered to her, to myself, to the ocean beyond. I am no longer the shadow behind someone else. I am the one writing the next chapter of my life. And then, I raised the cup toward the horizon, where the sun climbed, steady and bright. Thank you for walking with me all the way here. I'm Sarah Miller, 42 years old, a woman who almost lost everything because I mistook chains for family ties. If you've read this far, it means you carried some of my weight with me. The sleepless nights, the silence around the dinner table, the echo of the gavel that finally set me free. That matters more than you know. Let me ask you this, directly, heart to heart. If one day, the person you trusted most forged your name to steal your future, would you stay silent or fight for your dignity? I had to answer that question in the hardest way. And my answer became the difference between losing myself forever and standing up for who I am. But I wonder, what would yours be? If my story touched something in you, I invite you to speak. Leave a comment. Tell me what you would do, or tell me what you have done in moments when love became a weapon instead of a refuge. Share this story if you think someone else needs to hear it. Maybe your sister. Maybe a friend. Maybe a stranger sitting in their kitchen right now, staring at an empty chair, wondering if they have the strength to say no. And if you want to hear more, follow along. Every week, I share another journey, sometimes mine, sometimes someone else's, about loss, betrayal, but also about the quiet art of standing back up. I once believed my worth was measured in yellow envelopes and silence. I believed love meant swallowing my protests and paying with my dignity. Not anymore. I am not a walking wallet. I am the keeper of the door to my own freedom. And if my voice tonight helps even one other person find theirs, then every word has been worth it.